Welcome back to this meeting of the Kapiti Coast District Council. We're moving now on to item 10.4, establishment of a Māori ward. I am of a mind to leave this one to lie on the table. We haven't got full representation from our iwi partners at the table, which brings me to an apology that I missed at the start of the meeting. Andre Baker has tendered his apologies. So if I could have a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Spires, seconded by Councillor Wilson. All in favour? Aye. That's carried. If that could be added to the apologies at the start of the agenda, that would be appreciated. So going back to leaving this to lie on the table, we do have a special council meeting on the 10th of August. So I'm proposing that we consider this then. I've been advised by staff that would still give adequate time to carry out the engagement necessary to consider this should we decide to do that in this triennium. In the meantime, they'll start doing some preparatory work just in case that goes through to make us, to give us adequate time. So I move that we leave this to lie on the table until the 10th of August meeting of council, seconded by Councillor Wilson. All in favour, please say aye. Aye, that's carried. So moving on to item 10.5, selecting the electoral system for local body elections. And I'll pass to
myself and Anna.
To Steffi and Anna.
Do you want to sit over there? I'll stay here then, so Anna can see. Anna will introduce.
Kia ora koutou. Just like to take the report as read, but I'm happy to ask any questions. We'll just note that we don't need to make a decision this time, but as we're mostly new around the table, we thought we'd offer you the opportunity to look at the two systems.
Great. Do we have any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Yes, I have a question for Mrs. Smith. If we were of a mind to go back to first past the post, and we need to go back and publicly consult, etc., has there been any estimation of what that might cost? Because that might be a factor that would influence people. Not that it should, but
No, I don't think we carried out an estimation on that cost. We did on the cost of a poll. I think we had a quick look at that.
all right.
But yeah, not on consultation.
Yeah, and the only other question then is about what that process might look like in terms of going back to the public. Does that require a referendum, as was required to change it to STV?
Sorry, this one doesn't turn on straight away. So if you wanted to go to the first past post system, there is no engagement required with the community. It's only if you decided you wanted to hold a poll with the community. You can make the decision today that you would like to go back to first past the post. However, the community can then decide with enough signatories that they would like a poll. Yeah.
So it's an option, one or the other. We can decide today, or we can do a poll.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, is that clear? Do I have somebody willing to move either A.1, A.2 or A.3? Yes, Nigel, what would you like to move?
I'm happy to move 8.2. First past the post.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Cooper. Right of introduction.
Okay. I don't think STV has served the purpose that it was intended to serve in Kapiti. It's a lot of people conflated STV, local government, with with the broader general election system. If you go back to the heady days when we had when we had first past the post, the voter turnout in Kapiti was around, I think one year we had 74%. It was regularly around the high 60s, 70. Wainuiwhenua was always a bit higher than that. I remember the year that Iridi McCloy was elected mayor at that fateful period in Kapiti's history. The voter turnout in Waikato, I think, was 78%. So it was really high. People got excited. First past the post turned it out. The very first time that STV was introduced, I happened to be a candidate for it was the second time, a candidate for Greater Wellington. And on the voting papers, there were actually 2,000 informal votes. So 2,000 people didn't have their votes counted because they'd put an X or whatever. It was very, very tightly interpreted. I know the law now allows for borders, not quite so many as informal votes, but the numbers plummeted, and they've never recovered. So the number of people who engage politically has dropped away quite significantly. And we live in an area where there is an older population. They got used to just ticking the box. And when you have a multiple in a ward where you have a multiple number, it would just go tick, tick, and then it was the total number of ticks, and then people got elected. So if STV had shown that it did what the parliamentary system did, and that allowed voices to be heard that otherwise weren't being heard, then I'd go, that's great. But there's zero evidence of that. I couldn't find anywhere that says this system is more inclusive, that it brings more people in, that it brings greater diversity, that it achieves any of the aims that it was intended to achieve. So I'm not sure how much time people have spent thinking about this, but the fact is, what we do know, the data suggests either people have switched off because they really don't care about local government anymore, or the system has not been conducive to easy voting. And I would suggest that it's that. Given that we have a postal ballot, it should be really easy for people to vote, and yet STV, and we've seen the numbers drop away significantly. So I'm a first past the post person, and I'm happy to hear arguments why first past the post is, in this situation, a worse system.
Anybody else want to contribute to the debate?
Yes.
Councillor Coe.
Look, we've seen the hassles that it causes at election time, with iterations having to be run, and people are elected and then they're not elected and then they're elected again. And I think people find it confusing to understand how they can best vote and vote strategically. It's complex, and it's more complex than it needs to be. People have trouble ranking candidates. They're not aware that they can just vote for one candidate rather than have to rank everybody. There's a lot of a lack of knowledge, I should say, amongst the voters, and I think, yes, we need to, but then it's a little bit chicken and egg, because there's perhaps an education campaign and more information needed to be put out there so that people can make more informed decisions, and we haven't done a good job of that in the past. I don't think people have struggled to know what to put on the paper because there hasn't been, a really good repository for all the information about candidates, and they've just relied on, whether someone's got a nice picture in a little handbook as to whether they vote for them or not. So I think there's a lot we can do to improve the whole electoral process. But I think on balance, probably first past the post is a much simpler way to do it, and it's not like we're having to allow for minorities to sneak through the system, as you say.
Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, I tend to agree that when you speak to people out in the community, no one understands STV, or the complexities of it. It is a complex system. And essentially what we're asking people to do at local body elections is quite simple: vote for the people who you want to represent you. And with the complexities of, we saw, I think 2,500 votes that only voted for one person. And, after iteration 1, their votes were worthless. And I think sometimes you actually end up people getting voted in that people actually don't want through the STV system because of that confusion. You actually end up voting for people you don't want as opposed to people that you do want. And minority mayors, everyone says, I never voted for that person. Yeah, so I think we should just go to first past the post. People understand it. Our percentages of people voting has plummeted through the floor. And if I haven't got the data, but historically, if you looked at that, it's probably when STV would have an impact in that. Hugely complex, complicated. First past the post, vote for who you want.
Thank you. Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I agree with everybody so far. It's a hugely complex system of voting. I represent a population that is 35% over the age of 65 who've been brought up with first past the post. And frankly, I don't know anyone who actually understands STV. And I'm one of the 2,000 people who voted one and nothing else because it just seems too hard for me. I might be a bit dim. But I would, not that I'd get a vote, but I would support first past the post.
So we've had quite a few speakers in the affirmative now, so I'm going to chip in with the counter point of view. What's complex about saying this is my preferred candidate, this is my second preferred candidate, this is my third? To me, that's not very complicated. How complicated is that? I don't think the low voter turnout has anything to do with that very simple process of ordering people in preference. I also think that it works really well when you're picking one person. So this is my preferred candidate. I don't like the others. But if you say picking 3 Paraparaumu ward councillors, you're not able to say, this is the person I think is best for the job, and I really want this person to be elected, and I don't mind this one, and this one is my number 3. And if you want to go 4, 5, 6, 7, that's no skin off anybody's nose. You don't have to understand the complexities of what that means. It's not rocket science to use STV. I'll also point to the many, many studies that have shown that it's a fairer system in terms of people electing the people that they want to see around the table. And there's a wealth of research to show that. And if you don't believe me, you can look it up. I know quite a few political scientists, and to a man, they prefer STV. Sure, everybody grew up with first past the post when they were in the 50s and 60s, but predominantly over the world, electoral systems are moving to STV because it's modern, it's fair, and it allows people to express accurately what they think about the candidates, rather than, well, these are my kind of top 3. You know, a lot of people, even if there are 3 places, they'll only vote number 1 anyway, but that's not a very good thing to do. You might get people only voting for 1 because they don't want to vote for 2 other people who are the same. You know, it's to me but to summarise, it's not rocket science. You've just got to order people in preference. You don't have to understand how the transfers then work. You leave that to the experts. It's filling out the voting paper is not very complicated. What we need to do is make it easier for people to vote, work on that comms and engagement, do a bit of analysis about why people aren't voting, and solve that problem. We're not going to solve that problem by going to first past the post. Councillor Halliday.
Can I just ask for a point of clarity with regards to first past the post? Just reading number 25 on page 92. It talks that, correct me if there's 3 positions, say in Paraparaumu, then you'd have 3 votes in Paraparaumu. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 votes in Waikanai, 1 vote for a mayor, that sort of scenario. Is that correct? Yeah, okay, I just wanted to clarify that. you know, I thought this was actually going to be pretty straightforward. But my one note was be interested to see what Nigel's got to say. Yeah, I know now, and it's given me a bit of food for
We're
thought.
always interested in what Nigel.
Yeah, I thought there'll be a bit of a curveball come out on this one. It wasn't quite what I was expecting. So all of a sudden I've got to start thinking about it. Yeah, actually, I think a simpler approach. We've tried a more complex approach. To me, it hasn't worked. I get all the reasoning with diversity and all that sort of scenario, but we've got low voter turnout. I don't know why. Maybe if we try to simplify things this time around, we might get a higher one. I think it's maybe time for a change. So I think I'll be going for first past the post, give it a crack.
My turn. I'll step into this.
Janet's giving you that look.
I'm
No pressure whatsoever.
I'm under no pressure at all. I'm going to sit on the fence with this one because, and the reason I'm going to do that is because one of the things I stood for in this previous election was a phrase, "I'll listen, learn, and lead," and I can't say that I've got a clear picture from our community as to what preference they have. I think what I've heard so far is confusion between the issues around why people vote or don't vote and the system that we're using. I think those are two separate issues, and I think the comments made around information around candidates, around how people get that information, how they get the appropriate information about who they're going to vote for and who they don't vote for, that issue exists under First Past the Post and under STV. I don't think changing the system is going to change the issues that we have around why people don't turn out to vote. And I think that's a broader conversation that I think by us, and I'm suggesting maybe we need to go for A3, in my opinion, because I would like us to have that conversation wider amongst our community around why people aren't voting. Because I don't think it's necessarily the system. Because I think by implication of the statements made previously, we are implying that our voter public is a little bit dumb in understanding how STV works. I think it is quite simple. As the Mayor has pointed out, it is just a preference vote. You can prefer a certain number of candidates or not, depending on how many you want. So for me, I would stand in the moment of saying on this motion, I would vote against it in preference of A3, where we go to a poll for our community to get a bit of a voice from our community about what they would like in terms of the system that we are using.
I'm going to go to Hurawai online.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Probably more so coming from a community lens on this particular issue. I believe that my sort of 2 cents as somebody who moved recently into the Kapiti Coast District area, and then this current triennium being the first time I'd actually seen the local government elections here in this district. But for me, just as a normal person voting, the issue for me wasn't so much about the system of choosing your preferred candidate. It was actually about the system to inform which person should be the preferred candidate. So I think separating out the system of STV or First Past the Post versus the information required that would better inform who your preferred candidate is, and or whether it's things like civics or just better or more communication. I think it's that separation that's probably more needed. For myself, when I looked at this particular round of triennium, I was looking at who to vote for me, it came down to just my own 2 cents, a sort of a lackluster sort of brochure that I received, and I couldn't really tell from that, where each candidate stood, and I don't actually have Facebook, so that's my own problem there insofar as not being able to sort of see the meet the candidates nights, or listen to what the policy positions are for each candidate. So I just my own sort of 2 cents, not as a Te Tore, but just as someone in the community, it wasn't the system that was confusing to me. That part is quite easy. You pick and choose who your preferred candidate is, and if it's not number one, then it goes down to number two. That part was fine. Or if you don't want it, just go for number one. It was more about, for me, not having enough information to really decide between different candidates where each candidate stood. So that's just sort of my bit.
Thank you. Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, I kind of similarly to Councillor Halliday thought this might be a pretty quick discussion, but it's interesting to hear the views of different people around the table. So I've quite enjoyed just listening to the conversation so far. I think it's quite important for us to think about what kind of makeup of council laws we want to have, and then what system would enable us to achieve that. And I think as well as that, what system might encourage a diversity of people to feel confident in putting their name forward. Like, for example, if say you've got a young person who's really keen to run in Waikanai, and they might presume that because the majority of the Waikanai population is slightly older, that they are unlikely to achieve any of those or many of those kind of initial ticks. And so an STV system for them might go, well, at least I'll pick up something. So I think if we think about the kind of system we think might deliver on the diversity that we would like to see around the table, I think STV is probably a better option in my view. And also I think I completely agree with what Huriwa was saying about the separation kind of these two different issues, but also the fact that they're interrelated. I also just think there's a whole lot of people not voting because they feel like their vote isn't going to make a difference, and I think STV gives people's vote more of an opportunity of making a difference because they can further include others who might not be their number one or number two preference for any specific seats. More of an opportunity to not be wasted in the system, but to instead make a difference. So I think that is another benefit to STV. I think it also potentially encourages candidates to appeal to a wider audience too, knowing that they can have the potential to pick up kind of fourth, fifth preference votes, and not necessarily just appealing to the number one or number two ideal voter that they think they might have to pick up to then get the seat. So I just think in terms of the Mayor's points around diversity and encouraging not only a diversity of people to vote, but also to stand, STV seems to be the way to go in my eyes. And sure, we probably need to do some education around that. Sure, we need to increase the amount of information that gets out about candidates. But I think we also have to be quite aware of the makeup of the table currently, and also how we encourage diversity. Now, I don't think that moving to first past the post would, in my view, take steps towards achieving a more diverse range of representation around the table. So I'm not in favour of the current recommendation on the table and would like us to go with A1.
Councillor, Cam.
Yeah,
Mr.
not
Butler.
councillor, sorry. Certainly, in listening to Sophie's comments, I agree with that, and that we do require the diversity out there. First past the post just tends to be a populist election, because you're getting the people that are saying, well, how do I get the most votes? How do I get as many votes as possible? So I'll say the things that I think people are going to vote on, and not necessarily looking at the diversity and the needs and requirements of minority or iwi. Certainly from a community board point of view, STV gives you the ability to say, this is the team that I want. This is the 4 people that I would like to see on the community board, rather than just the one person that I think is the best community board person. I can actually say, I actually like these 4 people out of these 7. I know some situations we don't have 7 people standing for the community boards, but it allows the community to say what is the team that they would like representing them, and STV gives them that opportunity. It's not, you don't have to understand the exact science and numbers behind it, and as the Mayor indicated, you just have to show your preferences. Who are the people that you like the most? I mean, I had the interesting situation is because with the line move, I live in the Waikanai ward, but I was campaigning for the Otaki ward, so I actually spent very little time looking at the Waikanai candidates, and I got my voting papers and went, oh crap. And so just agreeing with what Horowai was saying, is that I suddenly had to, don't worry, I did vote for you, Richard. I then had to make a decision based on literally the fact that I knew one or two of the people from having been on the board previously, but also just this pamphlet that's in front of me with no other information. And there was very little ability for the community board members to actually speak to public meetings. In fact, for the Otaki area, we had to make our own, because there was not actually one single situation where the community board members could stand up in front of the public and talk. So we actually set up our own one. So that just comes into the whole, how do you get the information about the candidates out? And maybe the council needs to be more proactive at putting more stand-ups, more public meetings to ensure that everyone's got the ability to go along and actually talk to the candidates and see where their views sit. And maybe that pamphlet needs to be expanded onto, standard questions, don't know. But yeah, certainly, I know I can't vote, but from a community board point of view, the STV system is far preferable. And if you go first past the post, can you make it just councillors then, and keep STV for make it more complicated?
Afraid not. Afraid not. Yeah, I mean, I'll try not to say anything. Glenn Olsen.
Yeah, hey, yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm a bit conflicted on this because I can see the advantages and disadvantages of both. I think, if I look at the current system, one of the dangers is that a candidate who gets, in the first round, a large number of first votes can actually end up being taken out by someone who's getting 4th or 5th or 6th votes. And I think that's wrong for the community. And that's also part of why, I feel when I talk to the community, I do hear a comment often say they don't vote because it doesn't matter anyway because their number one gets knocked out, even if they get a lot. But on the other side of it, with the first past the post, one of the issues I see with that is because when we vote for councillors and community boards and these different things. If for example, Paparam, you had 3 people going, 3 positions for councillors and 4 for the community board. Now, if the public votes first past the post for 3 people and who are running for both councillor and community board, and those 3 become councillors, then they would only have 1 vote for the community board people because there would only be 1 left. So if you're only allowed to vote for 4 people in the community board, if all of those also stood for a councillor and got councillors, then, they didn't get a say in the community board. So I think that's where STV does, have an advantage over that, is that those people who do stand for more than 1 role, if they do get that higher role, then you can still vote for the community board, where otherwise you may have to decide, well, I will vote for them for councillor, but not for community board. If they don't get a councillor, then your vote doesn't mean anything. So that's where I see the two. So if I could have a vote where I would on this, I would actually be with Lawrence, and I would say go out and ask the community, because I think also changing it without talking to the community could actually backfire with the community coming back and say, well, you've changed it without talking to us. So I think, yeah, that's where I am on this anyway.
Councillor Spires.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I have been elected under both systems, so it really hasn't made any difference at all. And just like to say that, older people are not stupid. We do understand what we're voting for and who we're voting for. But some of the people that I have spoken to who do not vote say to me that why it's not going to make any difference to how much rates are going to go up. So it's the rate increases that are more on their mind than who they're voting for, because they just think it's not going to make any difference to my rates rise. But that's. I just wanted to say that because that's what people have said to me.
Thank you.
That's all.
Martin, you've already spoken,
actually just
so
had
I'll
2
go to
questions,
Councillor
actually.
Warwick. We're not doing questions, we're in debate, and you've already spoken. Councillor Warwick, sorry.
Well, I must be one of the dummies because I found the STV system quite confusing until I understood it. So there is a bit of lack of education, I think, because it does. I believe it's a okay system, but I also think the same as Lawrence and Glenn that we haven't asked our public, and I would be supporting Lawrence because we're making a decision on behalf of them without even asking first. And maybe within that poll we can if we're putting it out to the public, we can put education around the two different systems as well, so people who may not understand it actually have a better understanding. But I don't think we should make a decision without asking the people who it affects. I mean, there's 10 of us who are going to vote for 50,000 people.
But we are very wise.
But we are wise.
We are wise.
No. Is yours a procedural question, Martin?
The first one was I want clarity on exactly what Ben was talking about with regards to what does happen, well, from a community board perspective, and if a person does vote, point in case, Kathy was on the on both the roles for the councillor role.
No, I'm not putting
community
the
board role.
microphone on.
The community board role. How does that actually work? Because from a first past the post perspective, I don't quite understand how that would work.
Can I just ask a general question of the table? Do you feel like you have enough of an understanding of this to make an informed decision about it today? Because we're in no hurry. Can you just, do you feel okay? I'm just making sure, because that's quite a simple, basic question.
My problem is that I actually, what Lawrence said to me resonated with me. And I think there's two parts to this. Is one, do we want to go out to the community and ask them or not? Okay, if we do, done. If we don't,
you're now
done. And
debating.
then if we don't want to go out to the community, then we can pick between the two systems. That was just my thought. Because with what Nigel's talking about, Lawrence is going to sit on the fence. Other people are going, actually, we should be going out and talking to our community. I just wondered whether that would be a first step.
Okay, so that's a procedural question. So right now we're considering whether or not we want to move now to first past the post. If that succeeds, we go to first past the post.
Yeah.
If that doesn't succeed, then we consider somebody moves and seconds one of the other options. That's where we're sitting. We can't go backwards. We can't change that.
We could
That's
go
where
backwards
we're
if the
sitting.
motion was withdrawn.
No, because it's been seconded.
Again, it was just a valid point that was brought up, and
You
I thought it
can't
merited.
sit there and debate and request the mover of a motion to withdraw it. That's not really a done thing.
Okay.
Sorry. We're just debating this. We'll put it to the vote and we'll see what happens. Because everybody says they're ready to make a vote, so that's
No,
good. Just wanted to check in,
We just have, don't we?
and we got right of reply. Yeah. Unless anybody else wants to speak. I want to speak again. No.
So just a couple of things worth noting here. If we've got it right, then because it's so simple, what we are saying is that 78% of councils have got it wrong and that they're silly, because only 15 out of 67 councils in New Zealand use STV. All the rest use first past the post. So it's not like we are it's not like we're in the vast majority of people who have embraced this brilliant system that works so well. In fact, we are the opposite of that. I was actually a big fan and early adopter of STV for the very purpose that I thought it would bring in. It's like what Sophie explained, the theory of STV, and that's what I was a fan of. The practice of STV has shown that actually doesn't work at all. So it's a bit like a really bad curry. I think it gets really complicated at both ends. At the start, you've got people who are genuinely confused by this. At the other end of it, after a very small percentage of people have actually gone around to vote, you then have those STV, this really, really simple system. You have this, the last councils in the country to get their results are the STV ones, right? Since we went to STV, we are one of the. It used to be back in the day, the mayor knew who the mayor was just after lunch on Saturday, and now you're lucky if you know on Monday. There was the mandating process. So we have, since we've had STV, I'm pretty sure that 75% or more people have voted for somebody to be the mayor who isn't sitting in the mayor's chair, right? So it's been harder to argue that for a mayor to have a mandate when people can go, but 75% of people didn't vote for you. They wanted somebody else. So it makes it much harder to get a mandate for that. Having said all of that, I'm the great resonator here next to me. If there's a view that we would benefit by going back to the public and asking them what they think, I'm okay to go down that track. I actually think I know what they think. I think they will come back and go, first past the post, please. So how much money we spend. And I would take up Hurawai's point. What's really missing is civics education. But there is a common denominator between the numbers that used to vote and the numbers that don't vote, and it's STV. Pre-STV, the numbers were consistently high. STV and post, the numbers are consistently low. And nothing's changed. Politicians aren't treated with any more cynicism now than they always were.
What about the place that
Yeah.
past the post that's still low?
Yeah, well, but it wasn't here. So the resonator here is just inform me that there are places in the country where the numbers are still low and they're first past the post, and that's true. But we in Kapiti were ahead of the pack. This was one of the highest voting percentages in the country for a long time. Actually, we still are, relatively speaking, in STV. So, anyway. But yeah, and again, just back to the diversity thing, the idea that somehow STV brings greater diversity. Look around the table and ask yourself how diverse we are, and have a look at councils ever since there's been STV, and ask yourself how diverse have those councils been. So has it delivered? Has it delivered diversity? And we've had 7 elections, so if it was going to, it would have. So anyway, that's my argument. But again, if there's a broader view that says go and talk to the public, then I'm happy with that as well. So you might want to do a straw poll. No, we're putting that to a vote. All right. All in favour, please say aye. All right. Yeah, division.
I've just put it to a vote, and now we're going to do a division because it was a bit like asking a room to clap for the best act. Couldn't really hear. So those in favour, please raise your hand.
In favour? Wilson. Hands up, please. Councillor Cooper. Halliday. So I've got in favour, I just want to get this right. I've got councillors Cooper, Halliday, and Wilson. Okay, thank you.
And everybody else in favour, no abstentions? Yeah, we don't need to read them all out. Okay, so...
So is everybody else against?
Everybody else is against, yeah. Do you want him to read out the names?
Yeah.
Against.
Can I just see? 5. Okay, thank you. Yep, thanks.
Great. So we have a mover for A1, which is Councillor Handford, seconded by Councillor Spires. Right of introduction.
I don't really feel like I need to do a right of introduction, just take my comments from debate on the last motion or last recommendation, and happy to keep the conversation moving along.
Are you sure you don't want to say them again? No, you don't have to, Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, okay. So I will address A, because A really just isn't a good system for all of the arguments that were put there before. The difference is here, this one says this is going to be the system. To hell with the public's view. We already had, I think nearly half the council thought we should have first past the post, right? And then there were a few more who said, well, I'm not really sure about this. Let's have a talk about it. Let's go and see what the people think. So this is basically just saying to the public, well, we're not really interested. We're smarter than you are. So that's why I said I would have been happy to have pulled my motion on the basis that we would go back and talk to the public. Because if STV worked great, I'd be cheering. It doesn't, so that's why I'm not.
Right.
That's okay.
It is not a simple process to rank candidates. And so, yes, you might say it's very easy to say 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever, but people really, really struggle with that. And usually what happens is I get people asking me, who should I vote for? Who should I vote for? How should I, who should I leave off the list or whatever? It causes a lot of confusion out there. It is not simple, and people don't understand what their voting options are. I reiterate the point about, the iterations. It's just, and the minority mayors, the minority councillors that we end up with. It's not good democracy in my view. If we were going to do anything today, I would suggest we go for the third option, which is to go out to the community. We've got one councillor missing today. I'm not quite sure how he would have voted or not, but two councillors missing today. Be interesting to hear their views as well. I think the least we can do, if we're not going for option 2, we should therefore go for option 3. Thank you.
Through the chair.
I feel like I was pausing for a reason, actually, Councillor Halliday. I'm just feeling a little bit odd because we're now arguing the opposite, which we're not really meant to be doing. And the only reason we're considering this is because we're making the decision now instead of going to a poll. So I think that's what we should be debating. We've already debated the relative merits of STV and first past the post. Yep. Rather than getting a second crack at that, yep, I think we should be debating why we want to make the decision now rather than going to a poll, because they're the two options that are left open to us.
That's I've got no issue with that. That was my intent.
Thanks,
look, as I stated in my last time, I think it's time for a change. But I actually do take on board what Lawrence said as well. So I'm more inclined to want to go out to the community with regards to asking their opinion on this. We talked about being inclusive. We talked about communicating with our community. So I think this is a good opportunity to prove that. Digressing slightly, we've got a representational review question coming up at the next council meeting, so the two could dovetail in together. They might not as well. So, but I'm inclined to be wanting to go out to the community and ask their opinion so that we're inclusive with regards to this process. So I won't be supporting A1, and that will leave us with A3 as an option. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, I just concur with everyone.
Both sides.
That's impossible because we don't all agree.
My
great STV question.
Yeah. Yeah. No, seriously. Essentially, we've got a split council. Okay, it was 4-5, 5-4. Had we had two other members here today, it may have been 5-5, 6-4, 3-7. So my preference would be taking on board what Lawrence has said, and I'm always a fan of talking to the. I know I voted for first past the post, but I'm always a fan of talking to our people. We're here at their behest, and I think on this occasion with a split council, it would just be wise and prudent and good governance to go back to our people and be directed by them. Doesn't mean we can't have robust discussions. It leads to robust discussions. So won't support this, but obviously I would support going back to our people.
Okay, I'm the last, I think, apart from the right of reply. So I support making a decision today. I think we've got better things to spend the better part of $100,000 on than going out to ask our community which of, let's face it, both a little bit confusing systems they want to use. I mean, I've heard people describe things about first past the post that aren't accurate today in terms of how to vote and how to use it. We have a complex structure here, I think. We've got to vote for a mayor, we've got to vote for district-wide councillors, ward councillors, regional councillor, community boards. That's what's complex. That's what I'd like to go out and educate our community about. rather than spending money on a poll is it's not really how we make decisions in this community anyway. I would much prefer to have a conversation with our community to help increase understanding and help increase engagement rather than spending this money on a poll. So I'll be in favour of this recommendation today. So I'll go to Councillor Hanford for right of reply.
Yeah, kia ora, just to agree with that. And I think through, for example, Vision Kapiti, we'll be having lots of different conversations. So maybe this is something that we can kind of gather some informal thoughts on and then feed it into the next time that we review the system. But I just kind of feel like if we're talking about things being confusing and complicated, if we put this out to the public and say, what do you think out of this or this? How many people actually in the community have an informed view about what the two systems are? And as we've said, each of them can be quite confusing in their own right, and if you compare them to each other, and then we're asking, not to say that the community wouldn't have informed views on that, but I just think it might add a layer of confusion and complication to what we're already talking about. So I think if we can keep it streamlined, that's what I'm in favour of. And as the Mayor's talked about, using the money that would be put towards a poll on, Vision Kapiti, comms and engagement, for example, which is more likely to have a longer lasting and more kind of tangible impact on outcomes for our community than I would argue this.
Okay, so I'll put that to a vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary? No. Okay. We're doing a bloody poll. So I think we'll need to count again. So everybody in favour, raise your hand.
Let's do a quick count. Councillor Spire. Worship. Sophie. Against?
Against?
Thank you.
Okay, so we've left with two failed recommendations, so I'm guessing you're going to move the third one, which is A3.
Yes, please. I'd like to
Deputy
move
Mayor.
A3, please.
Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Coe. Right of introduction.
I've probably already said what I needed to say, but I think I don't make this decision lightly. I'm aware that it is a significant amount of our ratepayer money that we're committing to a poll. But I'm also aware that one of the things that we have stood for in this time as council is that we want to take our people with us on the journey of decisions that we make. And there is a cost to that in every situation where we go out to consult, where we go out for engagement. I think this is a significant issue because we are wanting our public to have their voice heard around who sits at this table, because we believe the decisions that are made here are important for our community. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here as a group of councillors. And so I'm quite happy to put my name against this particular part of our debate today in this motion, because I think it communicates the weight of this decision to our community, that we're not taking this lightly, and we are wanting to consider and hear their voice in this process.
Yeah,
Liz, yeah. Shelley?
I just wanted to explore the idea of, when we do a poll, how much can we put education in that, or links to education, I'm not sure, to civics education for the community, so they are very well informed about what they're deciding on.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, just well, we can take a question, can't we? Mrs. Smith might know the answer to this.
No, we're not taking questions. This
All
is
right,
debate.
then. So if I was going to ask a question, which I won't, but I probably would have asked if to take a poll in terms of timelines for it to be, so the public come back and go, yeah, we want first past the post, well, no, we think STV is brilliant, or to hell with the lot of you, whatever the public come back, at what's the timeline in terms of that being effective for the next election.
I'm sure there's enough time, or they wouldn't have brought the paper.
And one of the reasons I say that is because when we undertake a poll, I've done polls. You quite often get the response that sometimes the poll is engineered to. So I think it's really important that the information that people have given is balanced and clear, and perhaps local LGNZ might be able to assist. This debate, of course, has gone around the country several times. So there's been lots of material. So it's not like we would have to rewrite material. I think it's pretty. There's probably information out there. So yeah, and I agree. Go back to Hurawai's point about civics education. This is an ideal opportunity to just pour a bit of civics education in there as well. And you might have it might involve some Q&As that might be helpful as well. So supporting this.
So I'll go back for a right of reply to Councillor Kirby.
Don't think I have much to say, actually, so
Okay.
we can just vote.
So I'll put that to a vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? It's carried. So I just want to clarify, just for the record, I know we called a division because we weren't sure which way it would go, but I wasn't actually calling a division. So does anybody want the votes recorded against those? Or should we just say carried and not carried? Yeah, so when I was calling a division, to clarify, I was just counting up the yeses and nos, not calling a division. Yeah.
And none of us are predetermined when it comes to the outcome of the poll.
Yeah. So the Chief Executive would like to have a word.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to add, we will bring a report back to you because this is unbudgeted money. So it's not a huge amount of money. I appreciate that in the big scheme of things as to what council spends. But it's prudent for me to come back to you and say what we will need to either pause or defer to be able to undertake that poll for us.
Yeah, thank you. So we're moving on to elected members' remuneration, expenses and allowances policy. Duration, 10 minutes. Just saying.
This should be pretty simple.
We thought the last one was going to be simple.
It's insane. Yeah.
Okay, I'll ask Jessica and Janice to. So, Jess.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kia ora koutou. This report asks Council to note the updated elected members' remuneration, expenses and allowances policy for 2022-2025 and also the updated non-elected members' fees framework 2022-2025 following the recent annual determination of the Remuneration Authority. I would like to take the report as read and welcome any questions that you may have.
Could I just get a clarification? This is something that we've previously approved that just had to go through a process with the authority to come back to us. It's not a review or a, there's nothing new to see in this report. We've seen it all before. Just correct. Is that right? Just that's a question?
Correct.
Okay. Councillor Kirby.
So is that a hint I'm not allowed to ask a question? Okay, I won't.
No, you're of course free to ask a question if you want to. That's fine. Right. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Kirby. Any right of introduction?
No.
Waived. Any debate?
I'll be brief. Hang on.
Please.
I'll just remove 3 pages. Look, no issues with the documentation or anything like that. I just wanted to note that the local government review's been done. I've always banged on that in regards to our role, we're classified as a half FTE, and I think that that's a bit unreasonable for the workload that we have nowadays. So all I wanted to do is reiterate that that this is what it is, but we also do have other mechanisms with the general election coming up, where I think the local government review findings need to be very heavily pushed into our politicians, so that they are made to make some calls on what we can expect on the other side of the election in this space. That's all I wanted to do with that. Thank you very much.
A very important point, well and succinctly made. Right of reply?
Just quickly, yeah, what Martin said actually, and I understand there's a remit about KiwiSaver for elected members. I think that's a sort of moving in the right direction for those people who decide to make a career out of this. Yeah, that's it.
Great. Okay, I'll put those motions. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Jess.
Thank you very much.
Well done.
You have to try harder.
Reports and recommendations from standing committees and community boards. I'll note before we hear this report that how we deal with motions, with recommendations from standing committees and community boards is a work in progress, and I'm continuing to work on that. Luckily, the motions that we've got today have some very good staff responses, which we should be able to just note, hopefully. So, Steffi.
Yep. Kia ora koutou, through you, Madam Chair. There is one recommendation that has been brought to the table by the Wainuiwhenua Community Board, and it's around allocating funds in the long-term plan for the design and implementation of the safety measures for pedestrian safety on Te Moana Road. And as you have noted, there is actually staff commentary in the report.
Right. I will allow the chair of the community board to... Martin. Yeah, got it.
Thank you. This is a topic that keeps coming up at our community board from a very persistent set of residents on Te Moana Road, and it dates back well before my time on the community board, and they've provided us with screeds of evidence that there is an issue with speed on Te Moana Road, which may or may not be more than the speeds on other I think it's deemed a semi-arterial or a feeder road or something, but it is in fact a residential street. It has nothing but houses coming off it except a couple of churches and a dairy, and the speeds have been recorded in excess of 100 kilometres an hour. A lot of speed has been recorded in excess of 60 kilometres an hour on a 50 kilometre an hour street. It's interesting to note that KCDC have in the past applied to Waka Kotahi for half-share funding to provide pedestrian refuges in Te Moana Road. So there's obviously, or in my mind, there is an opinion in the staff that yes, there is a problem for pedestrian safety on Te Moana Road. Unfortunately, they were turned down, and there is no funds for unfunded roadworks within the district. So this is really a plea for putting some money aside for Te Moana Road, but perhaps also a fund for unfunded works where the community feel there is a need. At the moment, there is no unfunded funding, if that is the correct terminology. So it's just to, in the long-term plan, to consider the needs of A, Te Moana Road, and B, the wider community for anything that doesn't meet Waka Kotahi funding. Thank you.
Great. I think I've got a suggestion about how to deal with this. Councillor Halliday.
Yes, I'll be brief. First of all, thank you very much to council officers with regards to the information that's come back around this recommendation. Something's been talked to, so it's really appreciated to see. I just had two points of clarity more than anything else. And I take on board Richard's views around that, because we've got a similar sort of situation on Rupehi Street. Where it's just a dangerous street. There's a couple of them around the district. There's not too many of them, but they seem to fall outside the parameters of being able to get anything done with them through our current processes. With what's written here, it says 9.2.3 on page 175 refers to Te Moana Road fits within option 3 and is a high priority. Just from a clarity perspective, we're doing the speed management thing at the moment. That's sort of option 1, and then we go to an option 2, which is the next load of road work that we do, and then there's option 3. That's the stuff on the road that we do after that, which I think stretches over the next 3 or 4 years. Is that sort of correct? Yep, that's what I thought. So what we've noted here is that although there is an option 3, this is classed as a high priority, and I'm picking that it'll be up to the community board to perhaps bring that to the long-term plan process. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting a nod over there.
They've done the right. It is good to give us an earlier heads up as possible through the long-term plan process.
Yeah, no,
so
I'll just clarify that could be a good pathway for this. And then I also just want to know 9.2.4 talks to the speed management plan, but that really has nothing to do with the in regards to this document. It really has nothing to do with the improvements for the pedestrian refuge that we're talking about here. That's just a noted comment. Would that be fair as well? Like, there's not something that's been picked up in the speed management plan on Te Moana Road that's being referred to here, because off the cuff I don't recall any modifications to Te Moana Road as such in the current speed work that's being done. It's predominantly around schools as such. Would that be right? Yeah, cool. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, see, my take on 9.2.4 was that the fact that that's mentioned in this context sort of led me to believe that when that plan comes to council next month for decision, that included in that would be a resolution to the Te Moana Road problem. So that otherwise I'm not quite sure why that 9.2.4 would even be in there, because it seems to be in relation to the foregoing, right? So that's my assumption. I think that will be the community assumption, that's when we will get resolution to this. But I was happy to be corrected.
Yeah, so, Glenn's going to provide a response.
I'll inquire and get some clarity on that and get something out by the mayor.
So I do think, I did think I had a solution, but I do think these are ones for noting. I think the job's been done, staff have heard, we've heard, and the request is through the long-term plan, and we're not able to make those decisions right now. So, so council notes the following recommendations. The council notes, well, how we used to do it when we noted, or how we do it when we note. Council notes that, and then
Madam Mayor, can I suggest we just change the word considers to notes in the recommendations of B? That council notes the following recommendation from the Waikanae Community Board. It's B in the recommendations.
Oh, I'm under issues. Yes, sure. Thank you for your assistance, Deputy Mayor. So are you wanting to move that? Are you wanting to move A and B with note instead of considers?
Yes, I'd like to move those recommendations with under B that the word considers is replaced with notes.
Seconded by Councillor Hanford. Any comments on that? I would just comment that I'd like to acknowledge the staff responses and the work that's already underway to address this, but I'd also note that we're not just noting this today, we are hearing that should there be further need through the long-term plan for additional resource, we have heard this request and we will consider it. So with that, I'll put those recommendations. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against. That's carried. So we move on to confirmation of minutes. Do I have somebody to move? Councillor Kirby, seconded Councillor Wilson. Any comments? All in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. So we're going to move into public excluded. Can I have a mover? Councillor Warwick, seconded Councillor Kirby. All in favour? Aye. That's carried. Public excluded reports. We have a strategic property update. I'll just ask, is there any commercial sensitivity or any reason why community board members shouldn't be